And speaking of the next game that Alabama is going to be playing is in Coleman Coliseum at 6 o'clock on Tuesday, and it is against the Vanderbilt Commodores. And the Commodores are coached under Mark Byington. Mark Byington previously at Georgia Southern, then at James Madison the last few years. Took James Madison to the second round of March Madness last year before being hired by Vanderbilt. He has done a lot to the Vanderbilt team and has kind of completely changed around their trajectory from what they were under not Penny Hardaway, under Jerry Stackhouse. They are a much different team, a much better defensive team than they were, and it really feels like they're playing as a unit, right? The problem that I kind of felt when you looked at some of the teams under Stackhouse is they had really good individual players, but as a team, sometimes they were not playing fully as a unit. I think that's the thing that Vanderbilt does the best currently is that he's more modernized their offense, right? So they are a team that's going to be playing a little faster. They're going to be taking a few more threes. They're going to be, he likes to say that he has a lot of point guards on the floor. He wants guys that can pass, dribble, and shoot. And it's much more of that style of basketball. And I think that Byington has done a lot for Vanderbilt basketball. This season, they currently sit at 15-3, 3-2 in conference. They have wins over Nevada, TCU, LSU, South Carolina, and most recently Tennessee. Are some top 100 wins that they have. Their only losses this season are Drake, Mississippi State, and Missouri. None of those bad losses by any stretch of the imagination. Drake was in their MTE championship. Mississippi State and Missouri, obviously, in the SEC. Mississippi State, they did drop at home, and then Missouri was on the road, right? So this is a team that has a couple of wins, or has a win on the road in conference. They also won at Virginia Tech in the SEC ACC Challenge. So they do have a couple of wins on the road, but this is a team that has not been on the road a ton, right? So if you're looking at something that maybe Vanderbilt lacks, and they have not been on the road a ton in super hostile places to play against really good opponents. Their away game against Virginia Tech currently sits at 171 in KenPom, right? They're worse than any team in the SEC from a analytics perspective. Their other away win was against LSU, that's currently 69th in KenPom. Again, another team that's not great from a perspective of how good they are in terms of SEC, right? They're one of the lower ranked SEC teams in the conference. So Alabama will be the toughest road environment they will have played in. They did drop that game at Missouri that I mentioned. That was their previous toughest place that they had played. They lost that game by 9. And I do think that this is a game that Alabama should be able to win, right? But similar to that Ole Miss game, Alabama should have been able to beat Ole Miss, right? This is going to be a situation where Alabama still has to play their game, right? Is Alabama the better team? Yes, right? I think Alabama is clearly the better team than Vanderbilt in this game. I think Alabama should be able to win the game, all things being equal. But the question becomes, is Alabama going to be able to understand that the win over Kentucky comes because you played hard, you played your style of basketball, you were aggressive on offense and on defense, you rebounded the ball, and you played Alabama basketball, right? The reason you won the game is you played your game, right? Not because, we're just better than the other team. Because it felt like in the Ole Miss game, we felt like we were just, we're just better, and we didn't give it the effort that it required on the rebounding side, on the offensive side, even to a degree on the defensive side. Obviously, defense was not the problem in that game. It was much more of an offensive issue. But that is really what it felt like the problem was in that game, is that Alabama kind of just did not take Ole Miss as seriously as they should have, right? That's the thing that you need to look at in this Vanderbilt game. And I think that you'll be able to know very quickly how Alabama's going to do in this game based on, right, in the Ole Miss game, the game starts with like 5 straight turnovers. after those 5 straight turnovers, Alabama just never seemed to fully get in rhythm, right? Alabama never seemed to fully realize, hey, Ole Miss is prepared for this game, right? Ole Miss is a team that's able to get steals. They're able to understand your passing lanes. They're able to, if you're not quick with the basketball, if you're not paying attention to where you're passing, they are going to create turnovers. They are going to create steals, and they're going to stymie your offense, right? That is what it became very clear of at the beginning of that game, that it really felt like Alabama never got full grasp of, right? It never felt like Alabama understood the level in which Ole Miss was ready from a defensive perspective, right? Ole Miss was able and ready to jump in passing lanes, to create steals, to create the ball pressure, and it never felt like Alabama adjusted to that, right? That's something that, in theory, Alabama could have known coming into that game, and I'm sure that Nate and staff had talked about it. But if you're to ask Nate, he really felt like he didn't get the team prepared quite enough, for what Ole Miss was going to be doing, and he put some of that on himself. I would expect that Alabama is going to be prepared for this Vanderbilt game, right? They're going to be able to look at that Ole Miss game and say, hey, this is what Vanderbilt is doing, right? I would fully expect Vanderbilt to switch a lot. If you look at Vanderbilt's size, they are not a very big team. Overall, they're actually 305th in Division I in height. From a perspective, their two main centers that they run out there are Jalen Carey at 6'8" and Devin McLaughlin at 6'7". They don't have a current guy on the team listed at over 6'8". This is just not a huge team. But sometimes you have to understand that because it's not a huge team, they're going to be able to be a little bit quicker. They're going to be underneath you a little bit more. They're going to try to create steals, right? And that's what they have done this season. They're currently 7th in the country in steals. They're 8th in the country in causing turnovers from a defensive perspective. And they're just a team that does a good job at creating steals and turnovers. Tyler Tanner and Chris Mannon are both top 10 in the country in steal percentage, right? 2nd and 7th, respectively. Tanner also is 2nd in the country at not turning the ball over himself, right? McLaughlin is a top 20 offensive rebounder, right? They have some guys that are nationally ranked in a few different categories. And so what you don't want to see the team do is see that, oh, you're just playing Vanderbilt. Because sometimes, your mindset is, oh, we're just playing Vanderbilt, not a big deal, right? And at the end of the day, this is not the Vanderbilt team that you're accustomed to seeing, right? This is going to be a better team and a different team that you're accustomed to seeing in years past. Obviously, with their win over Tennessee, you can point to that and say, hey, look, Tennessee just went in there. Tennessee's obviously a very good team. Tennessee drops a game to them. So, you're able to point to that, but it's also, I think that Alabama just needs to play their game. Alabama just needs to do what they know that they can do, and I think that Alabama should be able to win this game. Vanderbilt is not the best rebounding team. They're not terrible, but they're not the best, so I do think that if Alabama rebounds to our potential, I think that's a place that Alabama should be able to have some success. Vanderbilt is not the best three-point shooting team. They're, around Alabama in around a 32.5% team. I think that Alabama should be able to have some success as it relates to, running teams off the line. I do think this game also gets up in the possessions. That is something that Vanderbilt likes to do, but obviously we know Alabama loves to do it. Alabama currently actually sits at number 1 in the country in tempo. So I do think that that's another thing that to Alabama's advantage. I think that Alabama can get out and move and get out and run in this game. So I would expect a guy like an Aiden Holloway to really be important in this game because of how well he can push the pace, how well he's able to shoot the three, how well he's able to take care of the basketball when there's ball pressure on the main lead guard, right? So I think those are some things that I would expect to see. I also do think a guy like Jaron Stevenson is somebody who you would expect to have a fairly large role in this game, just due to his athleticism and being a more small ball 4 or 5, right? Similar to Mohamed Diabate. Again, I would expect him to be a larger role in this game, again, due to the fact that they're smaller at the 4 and 5. I do think that it wouldn't shock me if Cliff maybe doesn't play quite as much in this game, right? I do think that obviously he's going to play because Alabama is really, really good, and Cliff is a great rim protector, and so Alabama is really good at being able to, they've been incorporating him into the offense a little more, throwing lobs and such. So I do think that I expect him to have a role in this game, of course, but I do think that due to the size and how quick I do think this game is going to get, it would not surprise me if Cliff maybe isn't in the game quite as much, just due to the fact that I think that, like I said, I would expect this game is going to get out and running pretty often. I would definitely expect to see a heavy dose of Chris Youngblood, a heavy dose of Mark Sears, a heavy dose of Aiden and LeBaron, right? If Darion Reed is able to play, I would obviously expect to see him a good bit in this one. But obviously, because of how fast paced this one is and such, you want to just sit Darion and let him get fully healthy. So, we will see how that ends up shaking out. I'm not sure if he ends up playing in this game or not. My expectation would actually probably be no, due to the fact that he didn't play on Saturday and it's a Tuesday midweek. If it was a Wednesday midweek, maybe, but I do think with a Tuesday midweek, it would kind of shock me if he played. Maybe, have him ready for Saturday against LSU. So that's kind of my thoughts as it relates to the game. From a prediction standpoint, I think that Alabama understands what went wrong against Ole Miss. And I think that the leaders of Alabama are going to understand, hey, at the end of the day, if you're going to compete for the SEC title, you can't drop a game at home, right? I don't care if you think that the other team is playing a better game or what. You just have to find a way to win the game at home. I think the team is going to understand that Ole Miss, was able to take advantage of us when we were careless with the basketball. And as I mentioned earlier, Vanderbilt is the only team in conference that's actually better than Ole Miss at taking away the basketball from a steals and turnovers on defense perspective, right? So I think Nate and staff are going to be able to point to that and say, hey, look how careless you were with the basketball. Look what happened and how much it stymied your offense. Vanderbilt can do that same thing, right? They're going to be able to point to that. They're going to be able to point to the win that Vanderbilt just had against Tennessee and say, hey, look, Tennessee did not take Vanderbilt seriously. Tennessee loses the game. Vanderbilt wins. Obviously, it's really tough to win on the road, but obviously Vandy wins at their home, defends their home court, and is able to take down Tennessee, right? But the big thing is that a win at home is not guaranteed, right? We saw that against Ole Miss. Just because you're at home does not mean you're immediately going to win in conference, and I think that's something that the team has to understand. I think that after the loss last week, I think they are going to understand that. I think that they're going to realize Nate's going to talk to them about, hey, if we plan on trying to win the conference, you have to defend your home court, right? First and foremost, you have to defend your home court, right? We kind of can feel like we stole one against Texas A&M and Kentucky, right? You won some big games on the road, but at the end of the day, if you're going to compete for the conference, you have to defend your home court, right? So I do think that Alabama is going to understand that and do that in this game. I think that Alabama does win this game by somewhere of 10 to 14 points. I'm going to predict Alabama wins 92-78. I do think that Alabama is able to play fast in this game. I think the possessions in this one are going to get up again to the 74-75 range, partially due to, I think, Vandy's going to try to keep the tempo up as well. I think that Alabama is going to do a really good job at taking care of the basketball and understanding what it takes to win. I do think that, like I said, I do think that Alabama wins this game. And if you are in attendance of this one, please be careful. Have a feeling it's going to be really cold outside. So if you are coming to Tuscaloosa for this one, please be careful and let's see what happens. But if you are interested in this content, please subscribe to the channel, like the podcast. There will be a breakdown episode that's going to come out on Thursday. I'll record that Wednesday to come out on Thursday, breaking down the Vanderbilt game as well as previewing the LSU game. It's going to be happening on Saturday. So we've kind of got our schedule evened out as to what it's going to be here moving forward. So if you do enjoy the content, please subscribe to the channel, like, comment, review. I do appreciate all of it. If you have any questions, throw them down in the bottom. I do read everything and reply to as many as I can. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.